Welcome, dear listeners, to our enchanting Miss Marple audiobook series, where the unassuming sleuth from St. Mary Mead pierces the veil of village secrets with her razor-sharp wit. Today, we unravel Miss Marple's murder announced in shadows, a gripping saga of a cryptic gazette notice foretelling death in a cozy English hamlet. Picture this: a quaint drawing room buzzing with curious guests, lights plunging into darkness, a gunshot shattering the night as a stranger crumples in blood. Was it a prank gone fatal, or a mastermind's deadly declaration? Join Miss Marple as she knits together clues of betrayal and greed. Cozy up. The revelations will chill your spine and hook your soul. Chapter 1. The Ominous Gazette. The village of Chipping Cleghorn nestled in the rolling hills of rural England like a forgotten jewel, its thatched cottages and winding lanes evoking a timeless serenity that belied the undercurrents of human folly. It was a crisp autumn Friday, the kind where leaves swirled in eddies of gold and crimson, and the air carried the faint tang of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Miss Jane Marple, that unassuming spinster from St. Mary Mead, had arrived the previous day to visit her niece Joan, who had recently settled into a modest bungalow on the village outskirts. Joan, a lively artist with a penchant for abstract canvases, had insisted on the visit to escape the monotony of her urban exile. Little did either know that the quiet hamlet harbored a storm brewing in the pages of its local gazette. Miss Marple sat in Joan's sun-dappled parlour, her fingers deftly manoeuvring knitting needles through soft wool, crafting what would become a scarf of intricate patterns. The gazette lay open on the tea table, its columns filled with the mundane: lost pets, parish meetings, and advertisements for second-hand bicycles. But one entry leaped out like a discordant note in a symphony, a small, boxed announcement in the personal column. A murder is announced and will take place on Friday, October 29th at Little Paddocks at 6:30 p.m. Friends, please accept this, the only intimation. Joan, pouring steaming Earl Grey from a floral pot, chuckled as she glanced over. "Aunt Jane, have you seen this? Some prankster's idea of fun, no doubt. Little Paddocks is just down the lane, Letitia Blacklock's place. She's a widow, keeps to herself mostly, but hosts the odd bridge evening, probably a murder mystery game for the villagers." Miss Marple's blue eyes, sharp as polished sapphires, lingered on the print. "Prank or not, my dear, words like these carry weight. In my experience, announcements of death seldom jest without reason." She set her knitting aside momentarily, her mind already threading connections like the yarn in her lap. Joan waved it off with a laugh, her auburn curls bouncing. "You're incorrigible, Aunt Jane, always seeing shadows where there are none. Come, let's walk to the shops. The fresh air will dispel your suspicions." The afternoon unfolded in leisurely strolls through the village, where hedgerows burst with late berries and the postman cycled by with a cheerful wave. Chipping Cleghorn buzzed with whispers about the peculiar ad. Mrs. Swettenham at the bakery speculated it was a theatrical stunt, while the vicar, sipping coffee at the Bluebird Cafe, pondered its moral implications. Miss Marple absorbed it all, her unassuming demeanour a perfect camouflage for her keen observations. By tea time, curiosity had infected the hamlet like a mild fever. Villagers murmured plans to drop by Little Paddocks, masks of nonchalance hiding their intrigue. As evening approached, the sky deepened to a bruised indigo, stars pricking through like distant eyes. Miss Marple and Joan joined the trickle of locals ambling toward Little Paddocks, a rambling Georgian house with ivy-cloaked walls and mullioned windows glowing warmly. The gravel drive crunched underfoot as they arrived, mingling with a dozen others. Colonel Easterbrook, retired and blustery, his wife Laura, elegant in pearls, the young actress Philippa Hames, with her dramatic flair, and Patrick Simmons, a charming rogue with a penchant for tall tales. Letitia Blacklock, the hostess, greeted them at the door, a tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a composed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome all," Letitia said, her voice steady as she ushered them into the drawing room. "I must confess, I'm as baffled by that announcement as you are. Perhaps it's Mitzi's idea of a joke, my cook, full of continental whims." The room was cozy, with chintz armchairs arranged around a crackling fire and a sideboard laden with sherry glasses and biscuits. Dora Bunner, Letitia's fluttery companion, bustled about, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Oh, Letty, it's thrilling, isn't it? Like one of those radio plays." The guests settled in, conversation bubbling with speculation. Patrick regaled the group with a story of a similar hoax in London, his gestures animated, while Philippa posed dramatically by the mantel, quoting Shakespearean lines about foul deeds. Miss Marple chose a corner seat, her knitting resuming its rhythmic click-clack, a soothing counterpoint to the rising excitement. She noted the subtle tensions, Letitia's occasional glance toward the clock, Dora's fidgety adjustments to her brooch, a gaudy piece of costume jewelry that seemed out of place on her simple dress. Joan leaned close to her aunt. "See, just a bit of fun, no harm in it." But Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. Fun, perhaps, yet malice often masquerades as merriment. The clock on the mantel ticked inexorably towards 6:30, its chimes building anticipation like a drum roll. At precisely the appointed moment, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into inky blackness. Gasps rippled through the gathering, followed by nervous laughter. "The game's afoot," Patrick quipped. Then a door burst open with a bang, silhouetting a shadowy figure in the hallway. A flashlight beam sliced the darkness, blinding the guests momentarily. "Hands up," a gruff voice barked, theatrical and strained. Before anyone could react, two sharp cracks echoed, gunshots, unmistakable. Screams erupted as the figure staggered forward, collapsing across the threshold in a heap. The light surged back on, revealing chaos. Sherry spilled across the carpet, chairs overturned, faces pale with shock. The intruder lay motionless, a pool of blood spreading from his chest, staining the Persian rug in crimson rivulets. He was a stranger, swarthy, in a shabby coat, his face contorted in eternal surprise. Pandemonium ensued. Colonel Easterbrook knelt by the body, checking for a pulse. Dead, shot clean through. Letitia stood frozen, her hand at her throat, a thin line of blood trickling from a graze on her ear. The bullet, it must have ricocheted. Dora wailed, collapsing into an armchair. Philippa fanned herself hysterically, while Patrick dashed to the phone to summon the police. Miss Marple rose quietly amid the frenzy, her knitting tucked away. She approached the scene with measured steps, her gaze sweeping the room like a lighthouse beam. The gun lay discarded near the body, a small revolver still warm, but her attention fixed on Dora's brooch, now lying askew on the floor, its pin bent as if snagged in haste. "Curious," she murmured to Joan, who hovered nearby wide-eyed. "That brooch wasn't on her lapel moments ago, and look, the clasp is modern, yet the design screams antiquity. A clue, perhaps, to premeditation." The police arrived swiftly. Inspector Craddock, a no-nonsense man with a clipboard, and a team of constables, cordoning off the area. Statements were taken in hurried whispers, alibis jotted down. Miss Marple offered her observations subtly, suggesting the announcement was no jest but a lure. Shadows hide much, Inspector, but they also reveal outlines if one looks closely. Craddock nodded gruffly, appreciating her insight without fanfare. As the body was removed under a sheet, the guests dispersed in hushed groups. The night's thrill curdled into horror. Letitia, bandaged and composed, assured everyone it was a tragic accident, a burglar, perhaps, startled by the crowd. But Miss Marple, walking home with Joan under a canopy of stars, shook her head. No accident, my dear. That man was invited by death's own hand. The motive dances in the shadows, elusive but present. Back in the bungalow, Joan bolted the door. Her earlier levity vanished. Aunt Jane, you were right. It's dreadful. Miss Marple settled by the fire, resuming her knitting. Dreadful, yes. But puzzles like this unravel with patience. Tonight's chaos holds the key. A misplaced ornament, a timely blackout. Rest now. Tomorrow brings light to the darkest corners. The village settled into an uneasy hush, lanterns flickering in windows like wary eyes. Miss Marple's mind whirred, piecing the fragments. The ad's precise wording, the stranger's deliberate entry, the graze on Letitia's ear too convenient for chance. For now, a tentative calm enveloped Chipping Cleghorn, the immediate shock contained, though the killer's shadow loomed, promising deeper intrigues in the days ahead. Chapter 2. Veiled suspicions. Dawn crept over Chipping Cleghorn like a cautious intruder, painting the rooftops in hues of rose and amber, while wisps of mist clung to the meadows like reluctant spirits. The events of the previous evening had transformed the village from a sleepy idyll into a hive of whispered conjectures, with curtains twitching and doors opening just wide enough for furtive glances. Miss Jane Marple awoke in her niece's guest room, the quilted bedspread rumpled from a night of fitful rest, punctuated by mental reconstructions of the chaos at Little Paddocks. She dressed in a customary tweed skirt and cardigan, pinning a simple brooch to her lapel, a subtle nod to the misplaced ornament that had snagged her attention amid the bloodshed. Downstairs, Joan was already bustling in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh scones mingling with brewing coffee. Aunt Jane, you look remarkably composed after last night's horror, she said, sliding a plate across the table. The police were here at first light, questioning everyone again. Inspector Craddock seems thorough but baffled. Miss Marple accepted a scone, crumbling it thoughtfully. Thoroughness is a virtue, my dear, but insight cuts deeper. That announcement wasn't a whim, it was a gauntlet thrown. We must peer behind the veils. People's histories are tapestries of hidden stitches. After breakfast, they ventured into the village, the cobblestone paths slick with morning dew. The post office buzzed with activity, villagers clustering around the counter like bees to a hive. Miss Marple lingered near the notice board, her ears attuned to the undercurrents of conversation. Old Mrs. Harmon, the postmistress, leaned over with a conspiratorial whisper. That poor man, Rudy Schurz, they say his name was, Swiss, worked at a hotel in Meddenham Wells. No one knows why he'd staged such a farce. Miss Marple nodded sagely. Farce or facade, Mrs. Harmon. Sometimes the mask slips to reveal the puppeteer. Their path led to Little Paddocks, where yellow police tape fluttered like macabre ribbons across the drive. Letitia Blacklock stood in the garden, pruning roses with shears that snipped decisively, her bandaged ear a stark reminder of the graze. Miss Marple, Joan, come in, if you dare, she called, her tone laced with wry humor. The house feels like a mausoleum now. Inside, the drawing room bore scars of the night, a scrubbed patch on the rug where blood had pooled, furniture rearranged to erase the disarray. Dora Bunner fluttered about with a tray of biscuits, her movements jerky as a marionette's. Oh, it's dreadful. I keep seeing that flashlight beam, like a demon's eye. Seated in a sunlit alcove, Miss Marple steered the conversation with gentle probes. Miss Blacklock, that scar on your wrist. Old, I see, but telling. From the war, perhaps. Letitia's pruning shears paused mid-air before she set them down. Astute as ever, Miss Marple. Yes, a shrapnel wound from the Blitz. I was in finance then, managing estates for absent owners. Turbulent times bred desperate alliances. Dora interjected nervously, her fingers twisting a napkin. Letty was a rock, saved my life once, pulling me from rubble. But secrets, oh, we all have them. Her eyes darted to the window, as if expecting phantoms. Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her mind sharpened. Secrets, yes, like alibis that whisper rather than shout. She rose, suggesting a stroll through the garden to clear the cobwebs. The paths wound through herb beds and trellises, heavy with late-blooming climbers, the earth soft underfoot. Joan trailed behind, sketching idly on a notepad. Near the compost heap, Miss Marple halted, her shoe nudging something anomalous. A muddy imprint, distinct and fresh, with a pattern of cleats smeared in what appeared to be dried blood. Look here, she murmured. Not from last night. The rain would have washed it clean. This is recent, deliberate perhaps. Letitia knelt, her face paling. The gardener, Edmund Swettenham. He was here yesterday, complaining about rabbits nibbling the borders. But blood? Heavens! Dora gasped, clutching her arm. Edmund's got a temper. His brother was slain in the war, you know, blamed it on black market dealings. Could he? Miss Marple straightened, brushing soil from her hands. Assumptions are veils, Miss Bunner. Let us confront the weave. They summoned Edmund from his shed, a burly man with soil-ingrained nails and a scowl etched by years of toil. He loomed in the doorway, wiping his brow with a rag. What now? Police already grilled me. Miss Marple met his gaze evenly. Mr. Swettenham, this footprint. Yours, I believe. And the stain. Not rust, but blood. Explain, if you will. Edmund's defiance wavered, his shoulders sagging. Aye, it's mine. Butchered a chicken for supper yesterday. Must have tracked it. But that ad, nothing to do with me. I hold grudges, sure. Blacklock's kin cheated my family out of land decades ago. But murder. Bah. The confrontation escalated as Letitia challenged him on old letters she'd found in the attic, demanding restitution. Words flew like arrows, accusations of sabotage, retorts of entitlement. Miss Marple interposed calmly. Grudges fester, but this print is a diversion, too obvious, placed where wanderers might spot it. She examined the soil closely, noting inconsistencies in the tread depth. Planted, perhaps, by someone familiar with your boots. Edmund grumbled, but provided his work log, timestamps corroborated by the vicar who'd seen him in the churchyard at the critical hour. See, clear as day. Miss Marple nodded, pocketing a soil sample discreetly. Indeed. You're exonerated for, now, Mr. Swettenham, but veils lift slowly. Back indoors, the group convened over tea, the atmosphere thick with unease. Inspector Craddock arrived unannounced, his notebook flipped open. Progress, Miss Marple. We've traced Schurz to a shady hotel, known for petty cons, but the gun was his, print smudged. She shared the footprint find, suggesting forgery. And this, she added, producing a crumpled envelope from her handbag, a letter she'd spotted discarded in the hall, its seal broken. Addressed to you, Miss Blacklock. The script mimics the Gazette ad, but the paper's from a Swiss mill. Forged, I'd wager, to lure the victim. Craddock examined it, his brow furrowing. By Jove, you're right. Ink's fresh, postmark phony. Letitia's hand trembled as she took it. It warns of past debts calling, but I owe nothing. Dora's tics intensified, her napkin shredded. Letty, remember that Swiss banker, Rudy's kin, the one from the War Fund scandal. The revelation hung like smoke, veiling yet illuminating. Miss Marple pieced it verbally, the letter a catalyst, drawing shares under pretense of payoff, only to meet death. But who forged it? Not you, Miss Blacklock. Your handwriting's elegant loops differ. Suspicion shifted to a timid neighbour, Amy Murgatroyd, who'd been seen at the post office with similar stationery. A quick visit confirmed her innocence. She'd lent the paper to Dora for recipes. Exonerated, Miss Marple declared, easing the household's knotted fears. As afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the lawns, a fragile equilibrium settled over Little Paddocks. The forged letter exposed so doubt but cleared peripheral mists, allowing breaths of relief. Joan walked her aunt home, the path lined with whispering willows. You're unraveling it, thread by thread, Aunt Jane. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Threads lead to knots, my dear. Tomorrow we tug at legacies that poison more than words. The village exhaled into evening, lanterns igniting like hopeful stars. Whispers persisted, but for this chapter, suspicions veiled thinned, a tentative peace woven amid the intrigue, beckoning deeper dives into the morrow's enigmas. Chapter 3. Poisoned legacies, midday sun filtered through the canopy of ancient elms lining Chipping Cleghorn's village square, casting dappled patterns on the cobblestones that danced like elusive clues in a cryptic puzzle. The air hummed with a subtle symphony of daily life, a blacksmith's hammer ringing in rhythmic cadence, children chasing hoops with gleeful shouts, and the distant lowing of cattle from nearby pastures. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the shadow of the announced murder loomed, tainting conversations with hushed urgency. Miss Jane Marple, arm in arm with her niece Joan, navigated the square with the grace of a seasoned navigator charting treacherous waters. Her steps were deliberate, her senses attuned to the village's pulse, seeking the arrhythmias that betrayed hidden malice. Their destination was the Royal George Inn, a timber-framed establishment with mullioned windows and a sign creaking gently in the breeze, depicting a crowned lion in faded gold. The inn served as the village's unofficial nerve center, where ale loosened tongues and secrets flowed as freely as the taps. Aunt Jane, Joan murmured, her sketchpad tucked under her arm. You're like a bloodhound on a scent. What do you hope to unearth here? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled with quiet determination. Legacies, my dear. Those poisoned inheritances of grudge and greed that fester over generations. People reveal much over a pint or a pot of tea, especially when they think no one's listening. Inside, the inn's taproom was a cozy cavern of polished oak beams and brass fittings, the scent of hops mingling with roasting chestnuts from the hearth. Patrons clustered in knots, farmers in tweed caps debating crop yields, a travelling salesman hawking wares, and a group of locals dissecting the previous night's tragedy. Miss Marple chose a corner table near the bar, ordering a pot of Darjeeling and a plate of cucumber sandwiches. Joan busied herself with quick charcoal sketches of the scene, her artist's eye capturing the subtle interplay of light and shadow on weathered faces. As they settled, fragments of dialogue drifted like autumn leaves caught in a whirl. At the bar, Colonel Easterbrook boomed to the innkeeper, Mr. Higgs, a rotund man with a florid complexion and a perpetual squint. Blacklock's fortune came out of nowhere after the war. Swiss banks, they say, shady dealings, and that Schurz chap. No coincidence he targeted her. Higgs polished a glass with a rag, his voice a low rumble. Aye, Colonel. Letitia's windfall raised eyebrows, inherited from a distant relative, or so she claims, but whispers of embezzlement. Families torn asunder over less. Miss Marple leaned slightly, her teacup poised midway to her lips, absorbing the web of financial desperation. Joan whispered, "They're painting Letitia as a magnet for trouble." Miss Marple nodded subtly. "Fortunes unexpected often carry toxins, Joan. Like digitalis in a garden, beautiful blooms hiding lethal hearts." Emboldened, Miss Marple approached the bar under pretense of requesting honey for her tea. "Mr. Higgs, such a dreadful business at Little Paddocks. You knew the victim, I hear." Higgs glanced around before leaning in. "Rudy Schurz. Stayed here a night or two. Nervous sort, asking after Miss Blacklock's habits. Mentioned a debt from Switzerland, something about a betrayed heiress during the war. Blacklock's sister, perhaps. Vanished under mysterious circumstances. Poisoned, they said." The word poisoned struck like a tuning fork, resonating with Miss Marple's instincts. She filed it away, her mind linking it to the forged letter's Swiss origins. As she returned to the table, a commotion arose in the adjoining parlor. Philippa Hames, the young actress, argued heatedly with Patrick Simmons over a shared bill, her voice rising in theatrical indignation. "You owe me for that script reading. Don't think your charm excuses debts." Patrick laughed it off, but his eyes held a calculating glint. Seizing the moment, Miss Marple suggested a detour to Little Paddocks' kitchen garden, where Mitzi, the temperamental cook, tended herbs with vigorous snips of her shears. The garden was a verdant oasis of lavender borders and climbing beans, the soil rich with the promise of harvest. "Mitzi," Miss Marple greeted warmly, "your strudel last night was divine. But tell me, have supplies gone missing from the pantry?" Mitzi straightened, her accent thick with Eastern European flair. "Ja, Fräulein. Arsenic for the rats, gone. And Miss Blacklock's special tea blend tampered maybe. Dark times, with that announcement luring death." Intrigued, Miss Marple requested a peek at the pantry, a cool, stone-walled room stocked with jars of preserves and sacks of flour. Amid the shelves, she spotted a small, dusty vial half hidden behind a tin of biscuits, its label faded but legible. "Arsenic poison." Joan gasped softly. "Aunt Jane, this could be the weapon." Miss Marple examined it carefully, noting the cork's fresh seal. "Not for rats, I suspect. This ties to the Swiss homicide Higgs mentioned. A betrayed heiress dosed fatally, her fortune diverted. Letitia's windfall. Perhaps not inheritance, but spoils of silence." Tensions mounted as they returned to the house proper, where Dora Bunner hosted an impromptu luncheon for villagers seeking solace. The dining room table groaned under platters of cold meats and salads, but the atmosphere crackled with unease. As guests mingled, Miss Marple observed Letitia passing a scone to Dora, who nibbled absent-mindedly. A faint, acrid whiff caught Miss Marple's nose. Bitter almonds, unmistakable harbinger of cyanide. "Stop!" Miss Marple's voice cut through the chatter like a whip crack. She snatched the scone from Dora's hand, crumbling it to reveal a faint powdery residue. Tainted. Cyanide, if my senses serve. Dora blanched, her hand flying to her throat. Who? Why? The room erupted in murmurs, eyes darting suspiciously. Inspector Craddock, arriving opportunely for updates, sealed the scene. Another attempt. This escalates things. Miss Marple directed scrutiny to Edmund Swettenham's cousin, Julia Simmons, a sharp-featured woman with a ledger tucked under her arm, visiting from London. Miss Simmons, your accounting work for Letitia, irregularities perhaps. Julia bristled, her cheeks flushing. Nonsense. I manage her investments, solid as rock. But under Miss Marple's gentle persistence, cracks appeared. Those Swiss funds, diverted from the heiress's estate. I handled the transfers, but on orders. The confession unfolded like a reluctant bloom. Julia's embezzlement to cover personal debts, siphoning small sums that ballooned into threats. I planted the arsenic vial to scare Letitia into paying more. But poisonous scone, never. Evidence corroborated. Her fingerprints absent from the pastry, her alibi ironclad from a morning train receipt. Craddock nodded. Scheme exposed, but not the killer. You're free, for now. With Julia's plot unveiled, a wave of relief washed over the gathering. Dora embraced Letitia tearfully. We're safe from that viper. The innkeeper, Higgs, cleared of any pantry tampering. His deliveries logged meticulously, offered a round of sherry, toasting to truth's bitter medicine. The community exhaled, a brief sanctuary amid the gloom, bonds strengthened by shared vulnerability. As afternoon faded into twilight, golden light slanting through leaded panes, Miss Marple and Joan departed Little Paddocks. The village square now bathed in softer hues, whispers tempered by the day's disclosures. Aunt Jane, Joan reflected, you've lanced a boil of deceit. Miss Marple adjusted her hat, her gaze distant. One poison drained, but legacies linger. The silhouette sharpens, greed's long shadow points to the heart of the web. Chipping Cleghorn settled into evening repose, lanterns flickering to life as stars emerged. The encroaching gloom held at bay for the moment, a dynamic tapestry of revelations woven, urging onward to blood-stained horizons, yet unexplored. Chapter 4. Blood-stained revelations. Twilight draped Chipping Cleghorn in a cloak of indigo velvet, the village lamps flickering to life like hesitant fireflies against the encroaching dusk. A chill wind rustled through the bare branches of the churchyard elms, carrying the faint toll of the evening bell, a sombre knell that seemed to echo the village's collective unease. Little Paddocks stood sentinel at the lane's end, its windows aglow with the warm flicker of firelight, belying the storm of accusations brewing within. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl drawn tight against the nip, ascended the steps with Joan in tow, her mind a whirlwind of interconnected threads. The Swiss heiress's poisoned demise, the arsenic vial's ominous placement, and the financial tendrils snaking through Letitia Blacklock's unexpected wealth. The drawing room was a theatre of anticipation, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and smouldering logs in the grate. Suspects had been summoned under the guise of a communal vigil, their faces illuminated in chiaroscuro by the dancing flames, shadows playing across furrowed brows and clenched jaws. Letitia Blacklock occupied the high back chair by the hearth, her posture regal yet strained, fingers tracing the armrest's carved vines. Dora Bunner perched on a footstool, her knitting abandoned in a tangle of yarn, eyes darting like trapped birds. Colonel Easterbrook stood rigidly by the bookcase, his moustache bristling with suppressed indignation, while his wife Laura arranged teacups with mechanical precision. Philippa Hames lounged dramatically on the chaise, her silk scarf a splash of scarlet, and Patrick Simmons paced the rug, his charm eroded into restless energy. Edmund Swettenham, the gardener, loomed in the doorway, mud still caking his boots, and Julia Simmons hovered nearby, her ledger clutched like a shield. Inspector Craddock leaned against the mantel, his presence a silent endorsement of Miss Marple's quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miss Marple began, her voice a gentle brook cutting through stone. "The veils of deception thin tonight. We gather not for recriminations, but for illumination. Firelight reveals much, creases in paper, stains on cloth, fractures in facades." She produced a small envelope from her reticule, its edges frayed, and held it aloft. "This found tucked in the attic's rafters during my earlier perusal. Blackmail notes inked in crimson, demanding silence over wartime indiscretions." Edmund's face darkened like a thunderhead. "Not mine. I'd sooner till rocky soil than extort." But Miss Marple's gaze held steady. "The ink matches your shed supply used for labeling seed packets, and the paper, torn from Julia's ledger margins." Julia gasped, her fingers whitening on the book. "Impossible. I record transactions, not threats." Revelations unfurled like petals from a wilting rose. Miss Marple detailed how the notes referenced the Swiss heiress's fate, linking Edmund's family grudge, his uncle swindled in Alpine dealings, to Julia's embezzlement. "You collaborated," Miss Marple continued, staining the demands with red ink to evoke blood, terrorizing Letitia into liquidating assets you both coveted. Dora's composure shattered first, a sob escaping as she clutched Letitia's knee. "It wasn't just them. Rudy. He was my weakness." The room stilled, flames crackling in the punctuation. "An affair," Philippa breathed, her actress's flair amplifying the drama. Dora nodded, tears tracing rivulets down her cheeks. "Met him in Medmenham Wells during a holiday. He charmed me with tales of Swiss lakes, but it was a ploy, using me to probe Letitia's routines, her vulnerabilities. I ended it when I suspected his motives, but too late." Letitia's eyes widened, a flicker of betrayal crossing her features. "Dora, you never said." Miss Marple interposed softly. "Love blinds, Miss Blacklock, but it also illuminates paths. Rudy's flashlight wasn't random. It sought you specifically, guided by insider whispers." Patrick halted his pacing, his face ashen. "And the gun, his own, but loaded with intent." Miss Marple nodded. "Intent forged in desperation, debts from his cons, amplified by promises of a cut from the heiress's diverted fortune." The narrative shifted upward as Miss Marple suggested an exploration of the attic, a dim realm of cobwebbed trunks and forgotten heirlooms, accessed by a creaking ladder that groaned under their collective ascent. Dust motes swirled in the lantern's beam like ethereal confetti, revealing a shrouded form in the corner, a corpse-like effigy crafted from wax and rags, its limbs articulated with wires leading to a concealed mechanism in the floorboards below. "Behold," Miss Marple announced, tugging a cord to demonstrate. The dummy jerked convulsively, mimicking spectral movements that had plagued Letitia's nights with thumps and whispers. Colonel Easterbrook prodded it with his cane. "Gad, a puppet show for terror." Laura shuddered. "Who rigged this abomination?" Miss Marple's finger traced the wires to a hidden panel, prying it open to reveal a cache of tools, pliers, string, and a journal scrawled with plans. "The handwriting matches yours, Philippa. Stage props from your theatrical days, repurposed to haunt and harass." Philippa recoiled, her scarf slipping. I was coerced. Bunny here, Dora, promised a role in a London production if I helped unsettle Letitia, making her pliable for the schemes. Dora's denial dissolved into confession, her voice a tremulous thread. It was harmless at first, sounds to mimic ghosts, driving her to confide in me more, but it spiraled. Miss Marple's expression softened with understanding, spiraled into complicity. Yet the effigy's wax bears traces of arsenic linking to the pantry vial, a fatal secret concealed in Letitia's altered will. All eyes turned to Letitia, who rose unsteadily. My will, untouched since the war. But Miss Marple produced a document from her reticule, a codicil, ink fresh, bequeathing portions to Julia and Edmund. Altered subtly, signatures mimicked, but the fatal secret? It conceals your true tie to the Swiss heiress, not victim, but distant kin, her death a convenient hush for your own wartime larceny. The room below erupted in cross-accusations as they descended, alliances fracturing like brittle glass. Patrick defended Philippa, his charm turning to chivalry, while the colonel demanded order. Inspector Craddock stepped forward, his voice authoritative. Enough. This unravels a conspiracy, but the core murder, not here. Miss Marple concurred. Indeed, these revelations expose aides, not the architect. Her gaze settled on a jealous relative lurking in the shadows. Amy Murgatroyd's brother, Clive, a shadowy figure who'd slunk in uninvited, his coat dusted with attic grime. Mr. Murgatroyd, Miss Marple addressed him. Your envy of Letitia's fortune, stemming from a disputed family branch, drove you to orchestrate the haunts, blackmail, and affairs exploitation. You rigged the effigy, stained the notes, even grazed Letitia's ear to simulate peril. Clive's defiance crumbled, his confession spilling forth. I aided the chaos, yes, hoping to claim a share through intimidation, but the shot, Schertz's own folly, I didn't pull the trigger. Craddock clapped irons on his wrists. Aiding terror is crime enough. You're nicked. The arrest sent ripples through the assembly, quelling the immediate dread like a balm on fevered skin. Dora embraced Letitia in reconciliation, their bond reforged in tears. Edmund slouched out, grudge deflated, while Julia surrendered her ledger to Craddock, embezzlement's veil torn. Philippa and Patrick exchanged glances of tentative alliance, the colonel offering a stiff salute to Miss Marple's acumen. Laura poured fresh tea, the ritual restoring a fragile harmony to the room, conversations turning from suspicion to solace. As night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like diamond accusations, Miss Marple and Joan departed Little Paddocks. The lane whispered with fallen leaves, a soft susurrus underfoot. Aunt Jane, Joan marveled, you fractured their deceptions like eggshells. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. Fractures heal, my dear, but truths emerge unbidden. Yet the blood-stained core awaits, the shadows full unmasking. Chipping Cleghorn exhaled into nocturnal quiet, homes aglow with renewed vigilance. The chapter's revelations had woven a tapestry of exposed frailties, alliances reshaped, paving a clear path to the morrow's ultimate confrontation. Loose ends knotted, intrigue undimmed. Chapter 5. The Shadows Unmasking. Morning sunlight streamed through the lace curtains of Little Paddocks, transforming the drawing room into a golden sanctuary where dust motes pirouetted like celebratory confetti. The village of Chipping Cleghorn had awakened to a chorus of birdsong, the night's chill banished by a crisp breeze that carried the scent of blooming heather from the moors. Yet beneath this idyllic facade, The final threads of deception hung taut, ready to be woven into a tapestry of truth. Miss Jane Marple stood by the window, her silhouette framed in light, observing the world outside. Villagers ambling to market with baskets brimming with fresh produce, a postman whistling as he cycled past, oblivious to the drama about to unfold within these walls. She had spent the early hours in quiet reflection, her knitting needles idle for once, as her mind orchestrated the culmination, a symphony where every discordant note would resolve in harmony. The dwindled circle assembled at her quiet summons, drawn by notes delivered at dawn. Dora Bunner, her eyes puffy from sleepless vigil, clutching a embroidered handkerchief. Colonel Easterbrook and Laura, their military precision softened by fatigue. Philippa Hames, her dramatic poise tempered into genuine solemnity. Patrick Simmons, his restlessness channeled into attentive stillness. And Julia Simmons, her ledger abandoned, face etched with resignation. Edmund Swettenham arrived last, hat in hand, his gardener's earthiness a grounding presence. Inspector Craddock positioned himself discreetly by the door, his notebook at the ready, a nod of deference to Miss Marple's unerring insight. Letitia Blacklock entered with measured grace, her silver hair catching the sun like a crown, but her eyes, those windows to a turbulent soul, betrayed a flicker of wariness. "Dear friends," Miss Marple began, her voice a soothing melody laced with steel, "we convene in this sunlit haven to banish the last shadows. No more veils or poisons, only the clear light of understanding. Sit and let us unravel the sinister web." They complied, the room falling into a reverent hush, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock, its hands marching inexorably forward like fate's own metronome. She commenced with the announced murder, that audacious proclamation in the Gazette. A smokescreen, she declared, not a jest, but a calculated lure. It drew Rudy Schertz like a moth to flame, promising payoff for silence over wartime sins, but the flame consumed him, a gunshot in the dark, orchestrated to eliminate a loose end. Dora leaned forward, her handkerchief twisting, but who pulled the strings? Miss Marple's gaze swept the room. "Strings lead to puppets, Miss Bunner. Consider the poisoned legacies, the Swiss heiress's fatal dose, her fortune diverted through shadowy channels to fund a new life here in Chipping Cleghorn." Julia interjected, her voice quavering. "The embezzlement, I confess my part, but it was under duress." Miss Marple nodded empathetically. Duress from one who knew the heiress's secrets intimately, one who impersonated kinship to claim the spoils. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Philippa's hand flew to her throat. Impersonation, but Letitia. Miss Marple produced an overlooked locket from her pocket, a delicate gold piece, its interior engraved with blood-red script. Initials intertwined, a date from the war's darkest days. This, found nestled in the effigy's hollow chest during last night's revelations. The engravings matched documents from Swiss archives. Not Letitia Blacklock, but Charlotte Godler, the heiress's confidant turned betrayer. Letitia's composure held, but her knuckles whitened on the chair arms. Preposterous. That locket is a family heirloom. Miss Marple's eyes, blue and piercing, locked onto hers. Heirlooms tell tales, Miss Blacklock, or should I say, Miss Godler. Your scar, not from shrapnel, but a struggle in a Zurich cafe, where you administered the fatal arsenic-laced tea to your friend, assuming her identity amid the chaos of evacuation. The fortune followed, laundered through banks, emerging here as your windfall. The room erupted in murmurs. Colonel Easterbrook's moustache quivered with outrage. Laura's teacup clattered in its saucer. Patrick rose, his voice steady. "Proof, Miss Marple. These are grave accusations." She unveiled a sheaf of papers, telegrams from Interpol, procured through Craddock's channels overnight. Witness statements from survivors, a cafe owner recalling your argument, a banker noting the identity switch, and the graze on your ear, not a ricochet but self-inflicted to feign victimhood, diverting suspicion while eliminating shirts who had uncovered your facade through Dora's unwitting slips. Dora sobbed openly. I told him stories, never knowing. Letitia, Charlotte, stood abruptly, her regal bearing cracking like fine porcelain under pressure. Enough. You weave fantasies from threads. But Miss Marple's gentle yet relentless logic pressed on. Fantasies. The arsenic vial in the pantry. Your prince faint but present, traced by powder tests. The effigies mechanism, wired with theatre wire from Philippa, but activated from your bedroom panel. The blackmail notes, crimson inked to evoke the heiress's accidental hemorrhage. All threads converging on you, ambition insatiable, born from wartime desperation, culminating in this announced slaying to silence threats and secure your stolen life. The defiant mask shattered. Charlotte's shoulders slumped, her voice a hollow echo. It was survival. The heiress, Randall's wife, she hoarded wealth while we starved in the ruins. One dose, and freedom was mine. Here I built anew but shirts. He demanded hush money. Julia's schemes exposed cracks. Edmund's grudges stirred old ghosts. The announcement. My masterstroke. To gather witnesses, stage the robbery, end him publicly as a tragic intruder. Confessions poured forth. The loaded gun planted in Scherze's coat during a clandestine meeting, the blackout time to her hidden switch, the arsenic ready for any who pried too deep. Craddock stepped forward, his tone measured. Charlotte Godler, alias Letitia Blacklock, you're under arrest for the murders of Rudy Scherz and Sonia Godler, plus attempted poisonings and fraud. Handcuffs gleamed in the sunlight, clicking with finality as they encircled her wrists. She cast a last glance around the room. Dora's tear-streaked face, the colonel's stern nod, Philippa's wide-eyed shock before being led away by constables, her footsteps fading down the gravel drive like a retreating storm. In the ensuing quiet, relief bloomed like spring flowers after winter's thaw. Dora embraced Laura, their shared vulnerability forging unexpected kinship. Patrick offered Philippa his arm, a spark of genuine affection kindling amid the ashes. Edmund muttered apologies, his grudge dissolved in the light of truth, while Julia vowed restitution, her ledger now a tool for amends. Inspector Craddock shook Miss Marple's hand. Your insight, ma'am. Scotland Yard could use more like you. She smiled modestly. Merely observation, Inspector. Human nature is the greatest puzzle, and villages its richest board. Joan beamed at her aunt as they strolled the lane homeward, the sun warming their path. Aunt Jane, you've cleansed the village of its shadows. Miss Marple paused by a blooming hedgerow, plucking a sprig of heather. Shadows flee before light, my dear. Chipping Cleghorn breathes freely now. No ambiguities, no lingering doubts. Only the quiet triumph of insight over evil. The village embraced its renewal. Laughter echoed from the inn. Children played unchecked in the square, and the Gazette's next edition would herald peace, not peril. Miss Marple boarded the afternoon train. Her knitting resumed, the locket safely in evidence. As the landscape blurred past, fields golden, skies azure, the tale sealed itself in resolute peace a chapter closed, the echoes of murder silenced forever in the annals of St. Mary Mead's unassuming sleuth